What we're talking about today is lesson 72, factoring trinomials in the form of x squared plus bx plus c. Okay, that means that we are dealing with a coefficient of 1 out in front of that x squared term. As you can see, I have listed several for here products of binomials, because factoring is whenever we take a trinomial back to that product of binomials. So we're going to show how it goes from one to the other. So if I gave you this on a test, which hopefully you would know what to do, you would tell me we would take first times first, outside times outside, inside times inside, and last times last. So you would get x times x is x squared, and then negative 2 times x is negative 2x, 3 times x is positive 3x, and 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. You would combine like terms. Negative 2x plus 3x gives me x, and you'd bring everything else straight down. Okay, I want you to do this one on your own. I'm going to do this one with you, and then you'll do this one on your own, okay? So you can pause and do this one first if you want to, or you can watch me do the next one and then go back and do the other two. So we're going to FOIL again. First, outside, inside, last. First times first is x squared. Outside times outside is x times negative 2, so I get negative 2x. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. And negative 4 times negative 2 is a positive 8. Combine like terms again. Negative 2x minus 4x is negative 6x. Bring down my plus 8 and my x squared. Okay? So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going from these trinomials because it has 3 terms, 1, 2, 3, and we're going to take it back to this product of binomials. So go ahead and practice your foiling on those other two. So it wants us to factor each trinomial, and the trick to this is to know what multiplies to get your last term. I need something that multiplies to get this, and something that adds to get this. So I know I'm going to split it up into a product of binomials, and I know that I'm going to have that x squared out front because x times x is going to get me that x squared. So now I'm going to list out anything that will multiply to get me 6, which is 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. Now, these are both positive, which means that these are both going to be positive. So I have to add. If I add 1 plus 6, that gets me 7. If I add 2 plus 3, that gets me 5. This is the one that I need because I have to add to get 5. So I'm going to put 2 and 3, and I'm done. Okay? Same thing here. I'm going to create a product of binomials whenever I factor a trinomial. I know that my x squared can be split to the first of both of those because x times x is x squared. So then I need something that multiplies to get me 15, but is going to add to get me a negative 8. Okay, so things that multiply to get me 15 be 1 times 15 and 3 times 5. Now the key here is that I have to add to get a negative but multiply to get a positive. So whenever I multiply to get a positive and add to get a negative, that means that both of them are going to have to be negatives, because a negative times a negative will get me a positive. Okay, and that's what I need. So that means that negative 3 plus negative 5 is going to be what I plug in here. So we can prove that this works by foiling to check it. So this is what we're saying our answer is. Okay, and if I take first times first, that's x squared. Outside times outside is negative 5x. Inside times inside is negative 3x. And last times last, negative 3 times negative 5 is a positive 15. Combine like terms. So I get negative 8x. Bring down my plus 15 and my x squared. And look at that. It checks. Okay? So this is our correct answer. You can always check these by foiling them out to make sure you get back to that original trinomial. So we're going to do the same thing here. I'm going to start by showing my two sets of parentheses. I'm going to split up that x squared into the front of both of those, the first. I need something that multiplies to get a negative 30. When I multiply to get a negative, I should know that one has to be positive and one has to be negative, because a positive times a negative is going to get me that negative. And I have to add to get a negative 7. So, things that multiply to get me 30. 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, and 5 times 6. Okay, so of these, I know that one has to be positive, one has to be negative. 30 and 1 just won't work because that's going to be too big of a number. If I had negative 2 plus 15, I'll write them out here. Negative 2 plus 15, that gives me 13. If I had 2 minus 15, that gives me negative 13, so that one doesn't work. This one, if I have negative 3 plus 10, that gives me 7, which I need a negative 7, so let's see if I switch my signs. 3 minus 10 gives me negative 7. So this is the one that I need, and the 3 here was positive, and my 10 was negative. Okay. Same thing on this one. Let me get there we go. I'm going to start by opening up my parentheses, put my x in the front of both. Okay. And then I have to have something that multiplies to get 54, negative 54, but adds to get 3. So since it has to multiply to get a negative, that automatically tells me one has to be positive and one has to be negative. So things that multiply to get 54. 1 and 54, 2 and 27, 3 and 18, 4 won't work, 5 won't work, 6 and 9 works, and that should be it. So 54 and 1 not going to work because that's going to be way too big for 3. The same thing with 2 and 27. On this one also looks too big. We can check it though. 3 minus 18 gives me negative 15. That's too big. Negative 3 plus 18 equals 15. Oops, that's an 18. Gives me 15. That's also too big, so it's not that one. So we know it has to be this one. And I know that one has to be positive, one has to be negative, and I have to get a positive 3. So I want you to pause the video and I want you to put in your 6 and your 9 where you think they go to make this one work. So pause now. Okay, so what you're going to do is look at this and see which one works. So we have 6 minus 9. That would get me a negative 3. So it's going to have to be negative 6 plus 9, which gets me a positive 3, and that's what I need. So the negative is going to go with the 6, the 9 is going to go with the positive. This is my final answer. Okay, now on problems like these. Whenever I start, I'm going to start the exact same way, and I'm going to start by putting my x's in both places. Whenever I have a square over here, it's going to have to go on the opposite side, so it's going to have to go in the last. So I'm going to split up that y here and here. And then I know I have to have something that multiplies to get 4 and adds to get 4. Well, you hopefully can tell immediately. They're both positives. Okay, so we have to have positives, and hopefully you can see that that's a 2. Because 2 times 2 gets me 4, and 2 plus 2 gets me 4. I want you to FOIL this out and check it and make sure it works. Okay, I'm going to start this one the same way. If I have my x squared, I split it into the first and first. I have a y squared here, so I'm going to split that on the last. And I see that I have a negative here, which means I have to have a positive and a negative to multiply to get a negative 18. So everything else I do at this point is the exact same as what we've been doing. They're just throwing in this y squared to throw you off. So things that multiply to get 18 are 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. So of these, I can immediately say that's not going to get me a 7. So we can check the first one here. If I have 2 minus 9, that gets me negative 7. This is what I need. So positive 2 is what I had, so I'm going to put the 2 with the positive, and I'm going to put the negative 9, or the 9 with the negative. Final example here. Before you start factoring these, you should always make sure that you have them in standard form. Okay? Standard form is your x squared plus bx plus c. We always want it in descending exponential order. So the first one is going to be my x squared, then my 5x, then my negative 24. I want you to factor this on your own, and I hope that you've taken good notes, and I will see you in class tomorrow. Have a good night.